It's not self-centered to think that the universe is looking out for you and to trust that it is. I've seen this argued that people say it's self-centered to think that, there's something looking out for you, that there's something constantly looking out for you and watching, wanting good things for you, and that how could somebody think that way, because that's very self-centered perspective to have. But I believe that we're all connected. Every person on this world, humans share some sort of connection, and I believe that humans are here for a reason. I don't think that this is a coincidence. So, what is the alternative? The alternative would be that this is all meaningless. We're all just miraculously here for no reason. And just we're like aimlessly like running around, and yeah. And that there's nothing looking out for us, or that there's something bad looking out for us. That's the alternative, I guess. If the argument were true, if this were all meaningless, and I've been thinking about this a lot recently. I've made a couple videos about it, but I've been like seriously thinking about it a lot recently. Say this was all meaningless, then why is there so much meaning? There's so much meaning in every single thing on this planet, and every interaction that we have with every person, or with like the close relationships that we have with people in our lives. There's so much meaning in, I feel like, everything that went into this planet and our being here. It doesn't make sense to me how the argument could stand that this would all be just some kind of coincidence, meaningless coincidence, where people live and people just die, and that's it. And that it just all means nothing. I'm not saying this to like belittle people's beliefs if people believe that, but more so just like making the argument to myself to make sense of things, I guess. I mean, it's something that we all think about, as people who live and die. Sometimes like I'll randomly get hit with this like overwhelming like realization that this is very temporary, and that our lives like are finite. It's, you forget, like you go about your day-to-day life, and you just like are so used to being in this body and living the life that you're living and being on this planet and whatever, that it just feels like it will last forever, and it doesn't. And it's very like kind of scary concept to wrap your head around. But sometimes I will just randomly be hit with like the realization that whoa, this really is temporary. This really is like that we won't always be the same age forever, that we won't always be, alive forever in this body. But I saw something that was like humans like to find, it was like about making the argument of why religion or why spirituality doesn't, not that it doesn't exist, because obviously, but why it is not real, I guess, like the argument. But anyway, it was like people like to find like spirituality or religion as some sort of like comfort. Because we're afraid of the unknown, like we want to have some kind of comfort, like, oh, this will be here, after this life is over. We want to have some sort of like comfort and like the unknowing. And also we apparently as humans like to find patterns and things like in spirituality and religion, we like to find angel numbers, and like we find those kinds of patterns. Or I guess like if you were to pray about something and then you would see like a sign, those kinds of patterns was like what the argument was referencing. We find like meaning in that, and like that we do like little like spiritual and like religious rituals for our comfort, like praying or using crystals or whatever people do. But if that were true, if we were only doing this for comfort and that was it, like if it was just solely for comfort and that spiritual things and religious things don't exist at all, and we just live in like a meaningless world where there's no purpose, and we were just making up stuff, if that were the case, why would we be able to find the patterns and things at all? Like, why, if it was meaningless, we wouldn't be able to find patterns and things, or if we were, it would be like a breach. I feel like, how is it that when you see like an angel number, for example, and then like you'll start seeing it everywhere, and you'll start constantly seeing angel numbers like all day long, every time you check at the time it's like an angel number. That's happened to me so many times. If it was just like me finding patterns and things and it was otherwise meaningless, how would that even be possible? I mean, I guess you could argue that it was a coincidence, and it's obviously I'm not the only person in the whole world who has experienced that. So, how would that be the case if so many people do, and so many people get like signs that they asked for, or things that they, manifested? I mean, like I said, you could argue that it's just a coincidence or maybe that whatever, but how would that even be so? Don't you think like things wouldn't fit together so well? And don't you think things wouldn't make so much sense? And the ability to find patterns in things and manifest things would pretty much cease to exist. How could the argument stand that this is all meaningless, like when there's so much meaning in so much? If people just live and they die and then that's it. And that's definitely something that I've very much considered. But plants, they die every single fall. And then every single spring, they're reborn again. And, if we're so connected with nature, how would it be any different for us? We are like a reflection of nature. I talked about this, like our veins, matching like lightning and matching like the roots of trees, and like our fingerprints matching like tree stump rings, and there's like so many comparisons and similarities that we have with nature. I've heard that people every night when they go to sleep, they die and are reborn when they wake up in the morning, and I don't really know what that means. That is something I've heard, don't really know, but I've heard the argument that we are the universe experiencing itself, and also that, we're like one sort of spirit dispersed into like all of these different people. And I don't know what the truth is, but I think that is interesting. I was sitting outside and this like leaf just like fell on my lap. I've obviously looked at leaves like a million times in my life, but I feel like we don't always really pay attention to things like that. We, like I was saying, we get used to things and they become kind of trivial or mundane, or they just kind of go unnoticed. Just picked it up and I'm like looking at it. I'm just like, there is so much detail, you know, like in the singular leaf. Like the amount of detail it's just, and then you think about all of the detail in all of the trees and in all of like the flowers and in the whole world, like in nature, the amount of detail that there is in nature is just the amount of detail in sand. You know, we can't even pick it up with our eyes, but if you look up sand zoomed in, it's like insane. The amount of texture and colors and whatever, even in the sky when it's like a sunset or like a sunrise, everything just feels so intricately detailed that it just feels like too much so to be a coincidence. You know what I mean? Down to every cell, you know, in our body, literally working for us every single day to keep us alive. Existence itself feels too profound to just be a coincidence, like chalked up to just being a coincidence. And I think when you're like looking for it, you notice it. And if you're not looking for it, then it goes unnoticed. Recently, I got my associates, and at my commencement, there's a woman who was speaking, and she was saying how everything like in our universe feels too coincidental, or feels too intentional, and I can't remember like word for word what she said, but it was basically what I was just saying. Like, it feels too intentional. It feels like undeniably meaningful, and that we're all meant to be here for a reason, and we're all meant to be human. And I was just like thinking, I've been thinking this too. And of course I know people also think like that, but I don't know. It is cool to hear a stranger like believe something that you also believe. Even just how like meaningful thinking positively is, and being consistent with that. And I had been so consistent with that for like a while. Like I genuinely hadn't even realized the positive effect that it was truly having on me. I mean, of course I did realize, but at the same time, I didn't. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like you can only realize sometimes things to a certain extent. I had like these barriers up, and I was like seeing like just the positivity and these like barriers up around me, like blocking off like the negativity. I kind of, for some reason, you know what happens, took those barriers, kind of like fell, whatever. We can't be positive all the time. I was kind of like being a little negative. And I realized like just how much focusing on the positivity and kind of just like not giving my attention to the negativity, I just like how much just bettering my life, and just like not allowing myself to focus on certain negative aspects. Because one, I started giving them attention again, it was just like making me more negative. I was just like back to like kind of focusing on more negative stuff. You see one negative thing, you're like, oh, all these other negative things, you know. Before I was like, oh, I see this positive thing, all these other positive things, you know what I mean? And it's just like overall bettering your quality of life. And I realized just again, you know, I feel like we realize things sometimes many times again and again and again, and we're just constantly regurgitating all the same stuff. As disgusting as that sounds, we kind of have to like retell ourselves things and re-remind ourselves of things. And I've been kind of re-reminding myself of how beneficial it is to be positive and to focus on positive stuff, because you know, I could have all this time been focusing on negative things, making me more negative and making, you know, my perception of stuff more negative and more just feeling like, ugh, you know what I mean? It really reminded me that, or reinforced my sentiment that it really is up to you. And it really is a choice what you're focusing on. I think we have to remind ourselves of things. I don't think we just, are told the concept and like we always just immediately grasp it or necessarily stick to it consistently. I also think it's not good to be overly positive and just like never allowing yourself to feel negative emotions. I think it's good to allow yourself to feel negative emotions and then let it out and then move on. I think the problem is when you get stuck in them and you ruminate. That is when it becomes a problem. Everything in our universe is so intricate. Before phones, people were very entertained by just like the world. I mean, I didn't grow up in a time before phones, so I don't even know a world like that. I've always remember like having an iPod and whatever, so I always remember there being technology around. But I feel like in a time before that, people were a lot more entertained by nature and the world. I have so much like to like marvel at, you know what I mean? Like be entertained by. Our phones are like this man-made thing that are designed to be very entertaining, so much so that it's like overstimulating to us and overwhelming. I don't think we're supposed to know this level of entertainment. It's like unnatural. It's so overwhelming. It makes us depressed. It makes us unable to live in the moment. And it makes people negative. I think it's so important to like fall in love with like being alive and fall in love with like nature. I think so many people are focused on like falling in love with another person that they don't prioritize falling in love with nature. And it kind of sounds silly, but I don't know. I remember being like a young teenager and being like, it's hard to explain unless like you felt it. This like love for life and nature, and like an old lady just like sitting out in the rocking chair looking at the leaves and the trees and whatever, and just being completely like content and more than content, like being very, very happy with something so like mundane and whatever. People always want to pour that like love into like another person, but you can pour it into so many things. Fall in love with being alive, and even like when life has been hard, I've always felt that being alive is like such a amazing thing. Think about how perseverant nature is. It will like always try to reclaim man-made things, and you'll see in like apocalyptic movies, like, and yeah, it's a movie, but nature would be like taking over and like reclaiming the world and all of these man-made things. If we just like let nature do its thing and just stopped interfering with it so much, and we just like kind of let it do its thing, like an apocalyptic scenario, then you would see how it is like persevering, like trying to grow everywhere and anywhere. Like, powerful in a way when you see nature growing through the cracks in the sidewalk and in just places that are very peculiar. I don't have another word for it, just something so like man-made or just unnatural, and you see nature growing there. Thank you for watching this video, and if you like the content I make, please leave this video a thumbs up and also subscribe. And yeah, let me know your thoughts on everything I guess that I talked about, and whether you like what your argument would be, if whether or not this is if you think this is a coincidence, or if you agree with me that there's meaning